Today I'm going to show you a 2015 Western thrilling adventure movie titled The Revenant. The year is 1823, and the film opens with a group of European settlers camping on the outskirts of a forest near a river bank after their successful hunting. They're processing the animal skins to sell them as pelts. Suddenly their comrade comes back screaming with an arrow sticking out of his back. The arrows begin to fly and hit another man in the throat, causing him to fall to the campfire. The Native American fighters have stormed their camp in large numbers, forcing the settlers to start retreating backward. One cowboy rushes to the open ground only to face immediate gunfire. The captain and Fitzgerald take cover behind the tree to save themselves from the hostile tribesmen. The two groups clash in a fiercely charged battle, their determination fueling the intensity of the confrontation. The bullets alerts Glass, who then runs back to help his outnumbered comrades. Their flanks became overwhelmed as more invaders approached, and then the commander ordered them to retreat into their boats on the river for cover. The men flee towards the boat, but the majority of them meet their demise before reaching it. Those who are already on the boat have no choice but to leave some of their comrades behind. The attackers ravage and collect valuables from the dead bodies while searching for the chief's daughter, whom the settlers have abducted. Glass and his son Hawk are among a handful of people who have managed to escape with minor injuries while others succumb to their wounds. Glass is the frontiersman and he has spent a lot of time in this wood. He suggests that they abandon the boat to escape the Re-Indians' ambush. However, Fitzgerald does not have this plan for him. He just wants to get to his house in Texas. But the captain has already made up his mind, so they disembarked from the boat along with their pelts and horses. Fitzgerald is still complaining about the captain's decision as they continue walking through the woods. He approaches Glass, who is sitting quietly with his half-Native American son. He hurls insults at the boy, but Glass continues to cool his temper and does not overreact while defending his son. Later it turns out that Glass was right about his plan because the tribesmen followed and intercepted the boat downstream. Luckily enough, no one was found on board. They set the boat on fire while the European settlers continued their journey on foot, carrying heavy pelts in the chilly downpour. When the group is resting, Glass decides to patrol in the woods to check for any potential danger. He finds a bear cat walking with its cubs. Suddenly the mother bear emerged from behind and knocked him to the ground. It drugged him helplessly against the ground and forcefully raked its claws across his back. Glass tries to fight back, but the bear is too big and strong, which makes him scream in pain. The bear steps on his head and sniffs his face, but Glass played dead and remained as silent as possible despite the pain. The bear departs to check on her babies. Glass seizes the opportunity to retrieve his rifle but barely has the strength to hold up. When the bear realizes he is still alive, it charges again, then Glass pulls the trigger but he misses the target. The bear attacked him again, reopening his back wounds before mercilessly drugging his body to the ground. Once more Glass pretends to be dead in order to retrieve a knife from his pocket, then repeatedly stabs it when it approaches for the final attack. The two fall down a cliff and the bear dies on top of Glass. Moments later, the captain and his men find Glass, but he's half dead and bleeding vigorously all over his body from his open wounds. Fitzgerald is not pleased with Glass's bullet shot because it could potentially alert the tribesmen and reveal their location to them. As they're providing first aid to Glass, the captain dispatches two of his best men to survey the area to ensure that the enemies are not pursuing them. In the middle of the forest, the hostile tribesmen meet with French savages to trade the pelts they stole earlier for guns and horses. The chief is looking for ways to truck and find his abducted daughter. Glass is still alive contrary to everyone's expectations. Unfortunately, he could not walk or even speak. As a result, they must lift him through the entire journey. It has become even more challenging due to Fitzgerald's opposition to everything concerning Glass. He complains that carrying him is slowing their pace. With everything in the forest blanketed in white and the weather deteriorating, carrying Glass is endangering the whole group. To alleviate his misery and save their time, he suggests that they shoot him since he's half dead. There is nothing else the captain can do but exterminate his friend. With a piece of cloth clogging Glass's face, the captain points the gun at his head. They had to hold Hawk back as he pleaded with them not to kill his father. The captain lacks the courage to do it when he states that Glass is the only reason they've stayed alive to this point. He then comes up with a better idea. 3 men should volunteer to stay behind with Glass. He has to lead the tired men to the fort, but he will send a rescue team for them. Each volunteer will receive a daily reward of $100. Hawk and Bridger decide to remain by Glass's side. Fitzgerald also volunteers himself as soon as he learns about the substantial reward. When the captain has left and Bridger has gone to the riverside to fetch water, Fitzgerald sees a chance to actualize his weird plan. He digs a grave just a few meters away from where Glass rests. He intends to kill Glass as a simple way to end his suffering, and all he has to do is blink if he agrees. He argues that if the hostile tribesmen catch up with them, no one will survive, including his son. Glass agrees and he blinks, and without hesitation, Fitzgerald tightens the rope bindings to limit his struggles and then uses a piece of cloth to suffocate him to death. Fortunately, Hawk hits Fitzgerald on the head with his gun. He calls Bridger for assistance, but he's too far away in the woods. Fitzgerald triumphs over Hawk, pushes him against the tree and covers his mouth. He then stabs him in the stomach while Glass watches the horrendous scene in pain. His son falls to the ground and dies. Then Fitzgerald removed the boy's corpse to hide his crime. Glass screams. He's powerless to intervene for his son as he witnesses Fitzgerald covering his son's body in snow. When Bridger comes back with water, Glass attempts to report the incident to him, but his voice can't come out because of the injuries. Bridger asks Fitzgerald about Hawk. He just pretends he does not know his whereabouts. Fitzgerald tells him that about a dozen Indian tribesmen are heading their way, and if they remain, they're going to be surrounded and face a brutal death. Bridger panics, however, he does not want to leave Hawk and Glass behind. Fitzgerald hurriedly packs his belongings and also urges Bridger to abandon Glass, but the boy isn't ready to leave him behind, the thing which angers Fitzgerald. He uncovers Glass, holds him by his legs, then drags him on the icy ground to the grave. He covers Glass with soil, burying him alive. Bridger does not approve of this. It feels wrong that the man is still alive. Fitzgerald runs into the woods, leaving Bridger with a difficult decision. He puts a bottle of water on top of the grave, then apologizes and follows Fitzgerald, abandoning him to his fate. Glass watches helplessly as the two leave him waiting to freeze to death. Glass wakes up a while later and uses the little strength remaining to pull himself out of the shallow grave. He drags his body across the ground to the site of his son's death. Hawk's blood is still very visible on the ice glass, and he is determined to find Fitzgerald. He soldiers on, and after crawling some distance he stops, and his face reflects the horror he witnessed. The boy's body lay there lifeless, and it had already turned cool. As Glass grieves, he puts his head on his son's chest and passes out. Fitzgerald is smoking a pipe to relax his nerves while Bridger is napping. He wakes up suspiciously since Fitzgerald's story about seeing the dozen Red Indians is not consistent. He becomes very angry and wants the truth. Bridger points his gun at Fitzgerald and threatens to blow his head off if he lies to him. Fitzgerald admits that he lied about seeing the tribesmen with a straight face. Bridger becomes emotional to the point that he sheds tears. Fitzgerald takes the gun, but when he pulls the trigger to finish him off, the rifle has no bullets in it. Fitzgerald throws the gun back at the boy to continue with his journey, leaving Bridger lying on the ground crying. Glass wakes up and says farewell to his son. He takes a few items, including a woolen coat for some warmth. He crawls to an animal carcass in a desperate battle to stay alive, removes some rotten meat, and eats it to stop the grip of starvation before moving on. Glass finally makes its way from the forest to a river bank. He fills the bottle with water and takes a sip. Because of his neck injuries, he coughs in pain and blood drips from the neck and mouth. The native tribesmen trail just as closely as they spot Hawk's body and fresh blood, then they realize they are very close behind. To stop further bleeding and body decay, Glass makes a fire, applies gunpowder and burns the neck bones. The captain and his men haven't reached the fort yet, and it's unfortunate that the cold has claimed some of them. Fitzgerald and Bridger also continue their journey to the fort. Glass is so hungry that he eats a dead bird for dinner. He tries to relax on the riverside, but the tribesmen catch up with him, so he retreats behind the cliff only to find himself visible. He jumps into the fast-moving river as the hostiles shoot arrows towards him. The first moving current pushes Glass downstream, causing him to fall down a waterfall and struggle out of the waters. Glass manages to make the fire warm himself before he freezes to death. He is so hungry that he jumps into the river to catch the fish and then eats it right there. During the night he hears some commotion on the cliff. He goes and finds a man eating meat from a buffalo he had hunted. Glass falls to his knees and begs for some food. The man is kind enough to throw a piece of meat at him, and Glass devours it without hesitation. In the morning the man is checking Glass's injuries, then recounts to him what happened, and it turns out the man was also in mourning. The invaders wiped out his entire family, and now he's heading south to find his tribemates, saying revenge is not in his hands. The man is kind enough. He saddles a horse for Glass, and when the weather worsens, they camp for the night. Fitzgerald and Bridger make it to their destination, where they report straight to the captain. Fitzgerald lies about what happened to Glass and his son. Bridger is clearly not happy with the report, but he also does not give his superior the correct story. He even declines to accept the promised money, which Fitzgerald is happy to retain. Glass's condition is getting worse every second, so the man makes a tent from wood and rocks, then treats his rotting wounds. When Glass falls asleep, he experiences hallucinations. He hallucinates meeting his boy in a ruined building and says their final goodbyes. But by daybreak the man had already disappeared. Glass walks around searching for him, only to find the man's lifeless body hanging from a tree with a plaque-ridden savage hanging from his neck. The savages responsible for this crime continue to camp a few meters away from his death site. It turns out they are the same men the chief and his men were looking for. They kidnapped the chief's daughter to satisfy everyone's last wish. In the middle of the lawless act, Glass sneaks behind the gang leader. The girl gets a knife from his pocket and holds him hostage as Glass goes to steal a horse from them. The horses make an alarming noise which alerts the other men. After cutting off the criminal's marbles, Glass orders the girl to flee. He also mounted the horse and escaped, abandoning the water bottle Bridger had left with him. Moments later, when Glass is sleeping, the hostiles catch up with him. They shoot at him and he barely manages to get on his horse and ride off. The hostiles are good on the horses, they're hot on his tail and converging towards him from all directions. He tumbles and falls off the cliff and his horse dies on impact. Hours later, Glass wakes up shaking because the temperature is freezing. Then he crawls and cuts open the animal's stomach, removes all the internal organs, and enters to avoid freezing to death. When the night breaks, he puts on his clothes and continues his journey to the fort where he knows he will find Fitzgerald. He intends to exact the same retribution on the man who brutally murdered his son. A very tired white man comes to seek refuge at the fort. The tribesmen had attacked and killed all his men, leaving him the only survivor. He has a bottle that Bridger left on Glass's grave when they buried him. Bridger listens as the man replies, "A man dropped it after stealing the horse," in response to a question about where he found it. Bridger reveals to the group that it's either Glass or Hawk. The captain organizes a rescue party once he learns about it. Fitzgerald gets very worried about the outcome as expected. In the darkness, the captain and a handful of riders search for Glass and Hawk. He emerges from the woods. The captain couldn't believe it that they left him behind, so he set out to find Fitzgerald to punish him, but his presence remains elusive. Fitzgerald knew the punishment for murder was death by hanging, and he could not wait around for it. The nurse tends to Glass's wounds, advising him to take days off. Nevertheless, all he cares about is the man who took his son's life in cold blood. The captain tries to convince him not to pursue Fitzgerald because he could die in the mountains, but Glass is not afraid of death anymore. Finally, they both agreed to go after the outlaw. The two split in order to cover more distance. Glass finds traces of fire at a camping spot where Fitzgerald was hiding. Fitzgerald comes out of his hiding spot pointing a gun towards the captain. As the captain attempts to retrieve a gun from his waist, Glass hears a gunshot. Glass quickly gets on his horse and goes in the right direction to investigate. He only finds the captain's body lying down in the snow. This means Fitzgerald is not dead and is not far away, so he comes up with a plan. He cut down a tree branch and continued with his journey in open space. When Fitzgerald spots it from afar, he snipes and shoots down the man riding the horse, but when he gets close, Glass shoots him in the shoulder. Fitzgerald runs and tries to escape, then Glass picks up his weapon and quickly chases after him. Fitzgerald fires a shot at him but misses, then throws away his gun in an attempt to run fast. Glass jumps down after him and corners him. There is nowhere else to run, so Fitzgerald tries to explain, but Glass has none of it. He's breathing fire as he comes face to face with the man who killed his boy. Glass is holding an axe whereas Gerald has a knife. They both aim their weapons at each other. Fitzgerald cuts Glass on the head, but he overcame it and pushed the weapon into Fitzgerald's stomach. Glass receives a stab to the hand from Fitzgerald, and he also strikes Fitzgerald with his axe. This weakens him considerably. Glass crawls and climbs on Fitzgerald's top. He has the capability to exact his revenge, but he remembers the lesson he learned from the man who helped him. Vengeance is not in his hands. Suddenly the tribesmen appear and Glass throws him into the river, directly into the path of the troubled chief's men, who then killed him. They passed by without harming Glass as they had found the chief's daughter, whom he had saved just recently. Finally, Glass has his eyes closed. Don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more of my videos like this.